Hello and welcome to this tutorial. I am going to be demonstrating several of my photo manipulation techniques. And to begin, well, we're going to be turning this guy into a caribou, at least partway. I'm not sure if we'll do all the antlers and all that, but going through the entire thing, you'll learn how to make selections, useful selections. You'll learn how to liquefy various parts, kind of get a feel for the three-dimensionality of the figure. We'll learn how to use coloration and layer masks. We'll learn how to use some brushes and how to use some other furring techniques. So basically, I'll give you a rundown of the tools I use and what I use them for, and some of the finer details of their use. So, let's begin by making selections. If you'll notice, I'm using Adobe Photoshop CS2 for now, which came out a while ago, but it's also the version that Adobe also released accidentally for free. I also have Adobe Elements 11, which is cheaper, but it doesn't have some of the functionality of CS2, which is why I use CS2. Okay, so making selections. One of the things that Adobe Elements has are a couple other selection tools. We'll get into those later. Or rather, more modern versions of Adobe. The basic selection tools, however, are the rectangular selection tool, the elliptical selection tool, the lasso tool, which just allows you to draw whatever, the polygonal lasso tool, which allows you to draw straight lines and cut that bit, and the magnetic lasso tool, which if you look closely, you click and then drag along an edge, and it follows that edge. So it's a really convenient way of cutting things out with precision. In the more modern versions of Photoshop, you have a selection brush tool, which works kind of like the paint brushes in Photoshop. And so you just kind of paint the area that you want to have selected. They also have a quick select, I believe it's called, which operates kind of like the magic wand, which I'll show you next. The magic wand allows you to select everything of a single color. And there are various options you can have with this. You can have contiguous, which means that it'll select everything of a single color that touches the pixel that you pick. Or you can have non-contiguous, which means it'll select everything of that color all throughout the entire image, no matter whether it's touching. Okay, a couple other things. You'll see up in this corner that there are a couple options. One is just a square. One is two squares. One is a dark square with a light square in front of it, and the other is two squares with a dark square in the middle. These are ways you can mix up your selections. I mostly use the first three. So, the first one is just making a selection. So I can make a selection like that, and then when I go to make another selection, it erases the one that I had just made. The second one, however, is additive. So if I make a selection, and then I make another selection, it adds them together into one selection. So I can make a bunch of selections. And if I want to get rid of a selection, all I do is Control D and it deselects. The third one is subtractive. So if I make a selection and I want to remove a bit of it, I just use the subtractive one, and voila, I have a smaller selection. Okay, so why am I spending all this time introducing you to the selection tools? Because you need them. With the way I like to photo manipulate, I take my subject and remove him from the background almost entirely. That allows me to have a lot of freedom with how I mess with the body, especially in the liquefy stage. So, we're going to remove this guy from the background. One of the reasons I selected this stock image, besides quality and clarity, was that it has a very simple background. So for this one, I think we only have to use the magic wand. Oh, another thing about magic wand is you'll see a number up at the top with tolerance. The higher the tolerance, the more... so if you have zero tolerance, it will only select pixels with the very same color of the pixel you selected to begin. So if I click 0 and click on the background, you can see that it made a very small selection. However, as it was around 30 before, and I make a selection, you see it'll select almost everything. So that's easy enough. But we've got to get this part over here. Let's switch to the additive mode, and we'll add that bit. And then we want to add these bits as well in between, so we can completely remove him from the background. Alright. Depending on your stock, you might have to use the magnetic lasso tool to cut something out. But yeah, you'll get a hang of that. So we've got this selection, but notice we've selected the background instead of the figure. You can get around that by saying Control-Shift-I, which inverts it. So now we have the figure selected. Now what I'm going to do is cut him out of that layer and put him onto a new layer. So, or rather, copy. We don't want to destroy the background for now. So let's click Control-C, that's copy, and then Control-V, that's paste. So if you look over here in this window, you'll notice that before we just had background. This is the layers window. Now we have layer 1 on top of it. And if we remove the background, you'll see that we have this checkerboard all around it. That means that that part is transparent. There is nothing in those pixels. If you were to save this as a PNG file, it would show whatever, like the background of the website would show through it. Okay, oh, and I just realized that there are a couple other things that I want to deal with selections. So, let me just demonstrate a couple things. So if I want to make a selection, and I don't want it to have hard edges, this is especially nice if you're... Well, I'll talk about it. So you don't want it to have hard edges. You want the edges of your selection to be fuzzy. So you would go up to Select, the menu Select, go down to Feather. And unfortunately, it does not add feathers. That would make it a lot easier. And if you'll notice, Feather Radius. So let's say 20 pixels. If you'll notice, the edges got a little blurry, or a little rounded. So let's copy that and see what it looks like. We'll pull it out here. See how it's fuzzy around the edges and it's kind of going to transparent? That's what feathering means. Okay, and if you want to undo, Control-Alt-Z is what you do for that. Okay, Control-D, deselect. Um, there's another thing that you can use. So, let's say, well, we'll probably end up using some of these later on. Let's go up to Select, Modify, and what you can do is I typically use Expand and Contract. Expand means exactly what it says. Expand this selection by 5 pixels. So in every direction, it'll expand by 5 pixels. Perfect. Great. And then contract is the opposite. That's useful if you think you have an extra edge. Say you've used the magnetic lasso tool and there's a light edge around the body that you're using. You can use contract, shrink it by about 2 pixels and get rid of that edge without having to go in and be very precise with your selection. Okay. All right. So what are we going to do now? What do you think? Oh, okay. Well, we're not going to manipulate the genes. Those are not going to be transformed into a caribou. So what we want to do is we want to select them and cut them, make them a new layer. So I'm going to use the magnetic lasso tool to go along this line. And to avoid, sometimes the lasso tool will do weird things when you go out of the working area. So what I often do is I often just keep it on additive mode. And I just move over. Oh, it jumped up. Okay, so we'll need to do a little correction in here. We'll zoom in. There we go. I'm actually going to switch to the lasso tool because that might allow me to get a little more accurate. See, the magnetic lasso tool judges based on differences in pixel tone and color and all of that. But sometimes it gets messed up. See, we're getting a little bit of the genes along with the skin in our selection. It's not a big problem, but just to show you how that works. Okay. Yeah, it's not allowing us to get that little triangular area in there. And if you look at the options with the magnetic lasso tool up in the bar at the top, you'll see that you've got a couple. You've got width, edge contrast, and frequency. Frequency is how often it drops little anchor points. Anchor points are where the line, so you see the little boxes that it drops along the way, or that you can click and leave? Those are the anchor points. And what it means is that the line can't change before that point. Okay. And edge contrast is how much contrast there has to be between different parts of it, different parts of the selection, in order to trigger the magnetic lasso. Oh no, wait. Oh, look at that. I accidentally selected the hand instead of the genes. Okay, so we'll have to redo that. Okay. Look at that. Mistakes can be made. All right. Oh, and to close out a selection, you just double-click anywhere outside of the selection, just so far as it's a place that you want in your selection. So there we go. Let's get this last bit of jeans. See, this is one of those points where backlighting on the edge of the arm is kind of blending into the jeans. Okay, so we've got the weird edges with the jeans. So let's switch to lasso tool for a bit here, and just get a lot of this. Additive mode. So I'm just drawing the selection. We've got all of that. So we'll go in here then, though, to get this area by the fingers. Make sure we don't get too much. Great. Okay, back into lasso tool. And I think we'll have our selection pretty soon. Alright, we have selected the jeans. So we're going, because we want this on a completely new layer, we're going to cut Control X and paste. Okay, we'll have to move these down and align them. You can use the arrow tools to do that, to be precise. Alright, there we go. And we're going to make one more selection. Okay. Actually, I'm going to finish with the selection demonstration right now. You know how to make selections now, and that'll be great. So I will move on to the next video.